back. Let's try and go back to Vishnu Shom, who's joining us with the latest on the Kozhikode plane crash. Vishnu, lots of more questions than answers at this stage.
There are three key unanswered questions at this stage. Number one, why did the pilot not divert to an alternate airport? Number two, was there enough fuel on board to attempt an alternate landing? And number three, why did the aircraft touch down 1 kilometer down the length of the runway? Now, let's try and see what we can actually piece together. I've been able to speak to sources within the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. I've spoken to pilots who've operated over there dozens of times. The question, the first one, why did the pilot not divert to an alternate airport? Now, this is an important question because as we've been reporting since yesterday, this was the second attempt at landing. On the first attempt, the pilot was unable to make a landing. We don't know whether it was because of visibility being an issue in the very heavy rains that he was trying to attempt landing at. And so he went around. Some reports suggest that he asked air traffic control whether he could land from the opposite end of the runway. This is when an attempt was made to land. When in fact there was a tailwind component at this stage as well. In other words, the aircraft was being pushed. And in a situation where the surface of the runway is wet, where braking distances become a real concern, was it the ideal decision to actually attempt a landing? We don't know, but that's obviously something which the pilot would have taken a call on. The second point over here is, was there enough fuel on board the aircraft to attempt an alternate landing? Now, remember, there are very strict guidelines. You must have a certain amount of fuel to enable endurance of a certain number of time beyond the airport that you're supposed to land in. So if I'm a pilot and I'm unable to land at my airport where I'm supposed to land, then I should have enough fuel to get to an alternate airport and have enough fuel to be able to circuit that airport as well before being committed to land. So to that, there is an answer, yes. Now, this is what the Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri told our colleague Sneha Merikoshi in a press conference earlier on today, where he quite clearly said there was enough fuel on board the aircraft. So therefore, the question still remains, why then did the pilot not attempt to divert to an alternate airport? Finally, why did the aircraft touch down 1 kilometer down the length of the runway? Now, this is the absolutely critical point. Our sources in the Directorate General of Civil Aviation pointing out that, in fact, the aircraft didn't touch down early on in the length of the runway. It touched down at approximately 1 kilometer, possibly even beyond that. Now, let's consider some of the factors which were involved. There was a tailwind. A tailwind meant that the aircraft was being pushed down the runway. Secondly, the surface of the runway was wet. So if you're not landing in your ideal landing zone, then once the brakes are deployed, then the distance which is taken for the aircraft to decelerate and come to a stop successfully is actually more. So what exactly do pilots do? In the case of a wet runway and taking into account several other factors, they add a certain safety margin. In other words, they virtually extend the length of the runway in their own minds to ensure that they actually do have that safe distance available. For whatever the reason is, what we can now report is that this aircraft was unable to stop. We don't know the speed it was at when it touched down, and we do not know the speed it was at when it actually went off the edge of the tabletop runway. But this was a disaster in which so many people have lost their lives.
Right, Vishnu. Thanks very much indeed.